It's a pretty crisp morning out here right now. It is late April, and it's been overall a really mild, pretty warm, early growing season. It feels like year after year that seems to be the picture. There's a lot of variations, a lot of things that you can't really predict for sure, but the trend, the way global climate shifts seem to be happening, at least in our region, is more mild winter, early wakening of things. This is a lot earlier than it used to be traditionally, and then random frosts on the way that last year zapped a ton of the fruit, if not all the fruit and nut crop in our area for the most part. This spring, this frost is not anywhere near that, but there's an opportunity here to take in what's happening and learn from it and make some observations and make sure I'm acting in intelligent and thoughtful ways around this variability that's starting to present more reliably. I don't have a temp meter outside here, so I just looked at the weather overnight, and downtown Ithaca, we're up on a hill here, downtown read 26 degrees Fahrenheit, and so I'm sure it was a fair bit colder here. It's definitely below freezing out in this landscape, but not so cold and not so long that it had any impact on things that had really good thermal mass. Like this thing of water, this container of water was filled and it didn't frost at all. So yesterday's inertia of warmth was enough to keep this from freezing at all. And I suspect anything that would be right around this would have avoided some freezing as well. And I've shared before the observation that this large apple tree right to the south of our home seems to confer some amount of protection from freezing as well. The area under here, I don't see any frost. These dogs are completely frost-free. This dog has a frost-free stick that he always wants thrown. But I looked out this morning from the window and I could see where the water in this little area, it's a little micro pondette, that had no frost in it either. I noticed that last May when we had the really intense freeze, the only apple trees that cropped well were ones that were underneath other pines. So there's definitely an effect of having an overstory. There's some benefit in having complexity in systems. The branches and the leaves here helped with, I believe, some radiative losses of heat last night, and so protected a little bit those plants that were underneath the shadow, so to speak, of those branches. You can notice as we go a little further out into the garden where it was quite a bit more exposed to the direct night sky, so completely open here, completely exposed, the frost was definitely a lot deeper and crispier. I've noticed our main garden tends to be exposed to frost a lot harder than the nooks and crannies that are tucked near our home or under trees. So here, this plastic, that got zapped for sure. I don't think that'll flower this year. A lot of irons in the fire already set in motion. Certainly we would not have put out basil and tomato out in this landscape yet. I've learned very clearly, even when it gets very warm in March and early April, to not mess around with that. We don't really tend to put frost-sensitive plants out until early or mid-May. But we have been transplanting nursery crops because they had to be moved, and also some annual seedlings. So these are lettuces. I wasn't about ready to come out and put cover over all these. They probably will be zapped a little bit, but we'll see. We've got another freeze tonight, but it's kind of important to start doing little waves of transplants just to see what can work. We got some Nanking cherries. These are seedlings that had sprouted quite a bit in the root cellar, covered in frost completely. But these are particularly hardy plants. I'm actually not worried about them at all. Like thinking about our nursery beds where I'm seeing a tiny bit of little chestnut starts, little tiny hazelnut starts here or there. This kind of frost, at least in my past experience, has not been threatening to them. So I'm erring on the side of not worrying about it, at least for now. Likewise, if I take a look at these honeyberry plants, so these happen to be Japanese honeyberry types, Boreal Beauty or something like that. These flowers, some of these are older flowers anyway, that's why they look a little rough. But the younger flowers, my past experience, until you get down into the lower 20s or at least 10 degrees below freezing or so, they do not seem to be damaged. So there's real value in a landscape, especially with an unraveling climate picture where you get warmer earlier, then colder later than you expected, on and on. Having a wider cast of characters that make fruit and nuts can be quite helpful. I could be very wrong about this, but I don't think there's anything for me to worry about with our honeyberry crop As long as it warms up a little today and tomorrow, the flowers will thaw out. They'll continue on with their work, and almost certainly we'll have a fruit crop. If that doesn't come to pass, I'll share notes. Likewise, when I look at our sea berry plants, I don't even think for a moment about, oh my gosh, are we going to lose our sea berry crop this year? They're at a very early stage of flowering. I was meant to do a video talking about this, and it's hard to see, boy. Well, just imagine, this is a female, this is a female cultivar. Sea berry right here, the male is right there, the more red looking plant. I don't know their specific numbers. Please, if somebody knows, share in the comments. The low temperature that these have to hit while they're in flowering in order to sustain damage is, I'm sure, very much different, very much lower than what we experienced. But then I move over to a plant like this, which is a pear tree. And these don't look too damaged right here, but this is where we start entering into fragility world. If on our north-facing slope at 1,200 foot elevation with high water table in the spring and particular frost pocket affinity for this landscape, if we were to commit this whole landscape to apricots and peaches and almonds and pears and apples, each year could be an incredible gamble whether or not we'd get any fruit at all. These seem like they're okay. They're a little further off the ground. The frost wasn't that deep, but it's a good reminder to have, if I'm gonna have a pear here, I better also have some black currants and some honeyberries and some sea berries. Of those 4 options, 3 will probably work out this season. The pear might be the one that doesn't. It's also a reminder to diversify the microclimates that you're planting things in. I've talked about this a little bit before in other videos, but at our larger landscape where we have 6 acres to experiment with, we have apricots that are in full morning sun, later day sun. We have some that are in the shade of pine trees and in cooler microclimates, and they all have really staggered flowering patterns, little thickets of them so they can pollinate with each other. Last night with the cold, dipping quite a bit below freezing, it'll be interesting to see how that translates, because they were in peak to later flower to early fruit set, so nice wide range. I actually feel pretty comfortable that there'll be some, if not a lot of fruit on those plants this year. If they were all exactly in the same open field orchard context, whatever the weather presents would present to the entirety of that block of plants. So either we get a great year or a 0 year. I'd rather have a blend of as many different things as possible, each peaking and some troughing, but that we're keeping busy with a harvest of a diverse set of crops. And the more the weather changes, the more I realize, oh, that's important. Diversity of plants and diversity of context in which they're planted, and diversity of relationships and how they're planted near one another. It's a sad looking morning for all these little annuals and some of the nursery plants, but been poking at this long enough that I think they'd be a lot more flattened out by the freeze last night if they were actually damaged. But there's always room to be super wrong on this stuff. Here's a character that I would be surprised if there wasn't some strong damage. This is a peach. Actually, I made a video a long time ago about this particular peach right here, that the origin story is eating a peach and pushing the seed, the pit right in the ground there. This is probably about 6 or 7 years ago now. And last year we didn't get any peaches because of an intense freeze, and this year, I wonder, this feels like for peach flowers, there we are, for them to be crusty this stage, I'm gonna just keep my fingers crossed that what that freeze represented, both last night and probably tonight again, is a good thinning frost, and that we'll still get some nice peaches on this. But I am not keeping my hopes up that we're going to be drowning in peach fruit to deal with this year. This is the kind of moments after an early warm spring and a freeze, when they're at this stage, we can generally assume you're not getting anything, but we'll see. Time to go let the chickens out. I can hear them complaining. They're not interested in me documenting whether or not frost damaged a flower or not. They want to get out and get some worms, so that's where things shift. But a good reminder, I think, at least a reminder for me, I like to do these little videos periodically of observation in a landscape at certain inflection moments. Like, we're transitioning towards spring in a more real way, and the winter vibes in this region are definitely strong enough that until mid-May, it's a pretty good chance you're going to experience a couple solid freezes. The one last year was brutal and very late and very intense. This is mild enough. I just wonder what it'll bring. And I haven't even talked about, because they're not even relevant yet, like, for example, the chestnuts and the persimmons. They haven't even leafed out in any significant way. there's such value in thinking about those plants that don't flower until much later. Chestnuts and persimmons come to mind. I'm sure there's many other that I'm just not thinking of right now that tend to not really even wake up until all of the frost threats in our area are over. So I love peaches, I love apricots, I want almonds. I think that's all fantastic and beautiful and gorgeous and great. What about everybody else? All of the currants have been so reliable year after year. Honeyberry feels like a pretty strong, reliable plant for us. Seaberry is just about as bulletproof of a crop. It feels like an annual cropping shrub for us every year. So making sure we're not just saying, oh, seaberry's hardy, that's the only plant to plant, or only honeyberry. All of the plants in all of the places to the best of your ability. Another good reminder to think about developing your nursery and propagation skills so it's not a bank-breaking endeavor to plant that level of diversity. Currants, you can just stick them in the ground wherever. Elderberry, same picture. So more resilience in all the places so that we can navigate this roller coaster of whatever the climate is doing. We're not gonna, I don't think I'm gonna change it, but I can certainly try to adapt our landscape to gracefully navigate it as best as possible. And with that, I'm done. Let us know what's happening in your area with some freezes or thaws or niceness for the spring. It's on to the chickens. Take care.